Sakshi Ganotra this side, a faculty member of chemistry at Ask IITians. So I have been teaching chemistry since last 2 years here at Ask IITians, and regarding my educational background, I am a pass out of IIT Roorkee. Moreover, I have also been a student of Hindu College Delhi University. So this was all about my introduction, and since now I have been introduced to you people, I think it's the best time that we should start over with some of the good chapter of chemistry. Now the chapter which I have thought of discussing today with you people is ionic equilibrium. And in this chapter of ionic equilibrium, this chapter is very important. The questions which are asked in the exam are like somewhat, they are very easy but they are very straightforward. So you should be knowing the very basic principles of the chapter so that even if you encounter any difficult question in the chapter, you feel good enough and you will be able to solve the question. So I think let's first of all begin with the chapter where we'll be discussing about the introduction of the chapter. Moreover, in this chapter, I'll tell you something about the Arrhenius concepts of acid and base. We'll also discuss about how an acid can behave as a strong acid, when it behaves as a weak acid. We'll also start discussing something about leveling solvents. Also, we can discuss about the pH of solutions, the solubility product, and also we'll discuss about the ionization constants of water and the different properties of water. So I have told you a large number of topics that I'm going to discuss in the chapter. So let's start with the chapter one by one. Let's first of all come over to the introduction part of the chapter. Let's start with the topic ionic equilibrium. Now let us first of all discuss the topics which we'll be covering in this chapter, ionic equilibrium. So first of all, we'll be discussing about the introduction for ionic equilibrium. Here we'll be discussing the areas where the ionic equilibrium is necessary and the areas where this ionic equilibrium will be used while we'll be solving the questions during our examination. Then after moving from the introduction, we'll move over to the Arrhenius theory of electrolytic dissociation, and then we'll also discuss certain types of electrolytes. Now electrolytes, non-electrolytes, these are the topics which have to be covered in very much details. After moving from this topic, we'll go over to the topics of the concepts of acids and bases. We must have been introduced about the concepts of acids and bases in our junior classes. Now it's a point where we have to apply how the concept of acid and bases will be used for solving the questions. After this, we'll have a discussion of leveling solvents. We'll also discuss about the common ion effect and the properties of water. Now we always know that water is what we daily use in our lives. But it is known that it has certain amount of good properties which we are going to discuss in this lecture. Then we can also move over to the pH calculation of different types of solutions. Now our solutions are of various different types. For example, we can have a solution of a strong acid with a strong base. Else we can also have a solution of a strong acid with a weak base. On the other hand, we can have a solution of a weak acid and a strong base, and finally we can have a solution of a weak acid and weak base. So what we are going to discuss in this chapter of ionic equilibrium is we'll try to find out what is the pH of these different solutions. Moreover, we'll also try to discuss about the relative strength of weak acids and weak bases. So we all know that the acids and bases can be divided into strong and weak, and then we'll finally move over to the relative strength of how they are going to perform themselves in the water. Over to this thing, then we'll move over to the discussion for the hydrolysis of salts and the buffer solutions. Also, we'll discuss something about the solubility product and the theory of indicators, which are generally used in ionic equilibrium and ionic chemistry. So in labs, you must all have think about that we are using certain kind of indicators, like we use methyl orange, we use phenolphthalein indicator. So the details of these types of indicators will be studied in this particular chapter. And once we'll try to wind up the chapter, we'll move over to certain questions from IIT JEE. Let us start now with the very first topic, which is introduction. So what we are going to discuss in the topic of ionic equilibrium is that all the chemical substances, they are either made up of polar units which are known as ions, or they may be made up of non-polar units. So what we say, for example, if you have any particular chemical substance, so if I have a chemical substance with me, I can say that either the chemical substance which I have is made up of certain polar units, or it can be made up of certain known polar units. Now the example for the polar units are, for example, if I consider a chemical substance NaCl, this NaCl is made up of two different units. One is Na positive and the another is Cl minus. So the individual Na positive and individual Cl minus, these are known as the polar units and these are specifically known as ions. The other type of chemical substances which are made up of known polar units may be, let us say, C6H12O6. So these are made up of known polar units and hence these are non-ionic compounds. Now what we further say that the substances which are capable of conducting electricity are called electrolytes, while those substances which are not capable of conducting electricity are known as non-electrolytes. Let us talk about some examples. For example, if I dissolve NaCl in water. Now, as soon as I dissolve NaCl in water, it will give me Na positive, Cl minus, we will also have H positive and OH minus in the solution. Now, because of the presence of these individual units, the solution will conduct electricity. Now, if the solution conducts electricity, it will be known as an electrolytic solution and hence it will be known as an electrolyte. Whereas, if we talk about some other solutions which do not conduct electricity when you dissolve them in water, such solutions are known as non-electrolytic solutions. Now let us talk about the general concepts and the principles which will be involved in the in chemical equilibrium, or I can say in the ionic equilibrium. We all have studied so many things about the physical equilibrium, where we simply talk about what are the things which are taking place. Like we do not talk about the solutions, we do not talk about what is happening inside the solution. We simply talk about like how the reaction is proceeding, if it is a just physical reaction, if something is happening. So to study about that reaction, we talk about physical equilibrium. But if we study about what is actually happening inside the chemical reaction, such kind of equilibrium is known as a chemical equilibrium. And the chemical equilibrium follows certain principles and certain concepts which we'll discuss one by one. So here, while doing about the chemical equilibrium, we simply say that the equilibrium constant is independent of the initial concentration of the reactants. Like in case of physical equilibrium, we write a reaction, for example, A to B. Similarly, if I study such thing in the case of chemical equilibrium, I write the reaction A aqueous plus B aqueous. Let's say it is getting converted into C aqueous plus D aqueous. So while we write down this reaction, we say that whenever I'll write the K equilibrium, that is the equilibrium constant for this chemical reaction, the value of equilibrium constant will be independent of whatever will be the initial concentrations of the reactants A and B. Now the second point for this thing is the equilibrium is dynamic in nature, and this is very much true. Like we say that if a reaction A is moving to form, like if you have some reactants A and you are mixing it with another reactant B, if the two are mixed with each other and the product formed are C plus D. So we say that in the initial stages, the A and B will combine with each other to form C and D. That means the reaction is going to proceed in the forward direction. Now as soon as the product C and D starts forming, so we say that if the amount of products which are forming has increased, then C will also start, C and D will combine with each other, they will start reacting with each other, they will start acting as reactants, and hence this backward direction also starts taking place. Now the point where the rate of the forward reaction becomes equal to the rate of backward reaction is known as equilibrium. So what do we mean by equilibrium is that at equilibrium the reaction is still taking place. That means the reactants are getting converted into products and the products are again getting converted into reactants. So it's not that at equilibrium the reaction doesn't take place. Equilibrium is not static. So I can say that equilibrium is dynamic in nature. And if equilibrium is dynamic in nature, that means both the forward reaction as well as the backward reaction, both are happening together. Let's come over to the third point, which states that the equilibrium constants depend upon the temperature and the nature of reactants and products. So if I write any particular reaction, like suppose I have written this reaction A plus B is going to form C plus D. So if I write the K equilibrium, I will say the K equilibrium value will be activity of C, activity of D by activity of A into activity of B. Now this activity of A, B, C, D, this will be discussing in the further parts of the chapter. And this we have already discussed in the physical equilibrium also. So that means the value of equilibrium constant, it only and only depends upon the temperature. So if you carry out any particular reaction at one temperature, you will have a certain different value of equilibrium constant. And if the same reaction is carried out at some other temperature, then the value will have a different value. So the K equilibrium value changes if you try to make up the changes either in the reactants or in the products, or if you simply try to make the change in the temperature value. Now the fourth point regarding this states that the equilibrium can be obtained from either side, and this is what we have discussed when we were doing this point 2 also. Like if for example you are starting from A, you can go to B also, and if like it's a just two kind of reaction, like if you have a reactant A and the product B. So that means either you can start from A, where A will start acting as the reactants and they will react with themselves or they will react with some other substance and they will lead to the formation of product. Now what other thing can happen is the equilibrium can also be achieved from the backward direction, like the products B, they start converting into the reactants. So it's a dynamic process and hence it can be achieved either from left to right or it can also be achieved from right to left. And this is the journal sign of equilibrium which we show. The first sign indicates the reactants are getting converted into products, and if I talk about this second sign, it indicates the products are getting converted into reactants. So based upon this sign as well as based upon all the concepts, we can say that the equilibrium can be obtained from the either side. Let's discuss more about this thing in further more details. So what we say is that the equilibrium in solutions will have only and only the equilibrium constant. So since we are talking about the equilibrium in solutions and we have already talked about how we are going to represent any equilibrium in a solution, that will be represented in the terms of K equilibrium, which is also known as equilibrium constant. Now in order to predict the direction of equilibrium movement, the reaction question Q should be compared with the equilibrium constant. So how can we explain this point? We can simply say that if you have a reaction where A aqueous plus B aqueous is getting converted to C aqueous plus D aqueous. So if someone asks me to write the value of K equilibrium, I'll say K equilibrium means the concentration of C at equilibrium, the concentration of D at equilibrium, the concentration of A at equilibrium by the concentration of B at equilibrium. So here for writing the equilibrium constant, I always take into account these equilibrium concentrations. But if suppose someone asks me that the reaction has not yet achieved equilibrium, or that means the reaction has already been done up with equilibrium and now you write the reaction quotient. So if I write the reaction quotient, I will simply say Q will be equal to the concentration of C, the concentration of D at any time t, here also at any time t, divided by the concentration of A at any time t and the concentration of B at any time t. Now, if I somehow come to know whether the value of Q is less than K or it is greater than K or it is equal to K, so I'll be able to predict what will be the direction of equilibrium, like whether the equilibrium will be achieved from starting from left hand side to move to right hand side, like starting from reactant to product, or the other way around is going to happen. So we simply say that if the value of Q is found to be equal to the value of K, we can say that the reaction is at equilibrium. Because if Q is found equal to K, that's nothing, but we are talking about that particular time where the equilibrium has been achieved. And that time for any reaction is known as equilibrium time. Now if I say the value of Q is less than K, that means the reaction will move from right to left to attain equilibrium. Because I'll say that if the value of Q is greater than K, that means the concentration of C and D is greater than the concentration of A and B. So if we simply say the value of Q is being greater than K, that means the reaction has to move from right to left. That means the reaction has to start moving in the backward direction to attain the equilibrium. And if I further simply say that the value of Q is being obtained to be less than the value of K, that means the A and B have to react more with each other so that more of C and D can be obtained, so that the reaction can come over to the equilibrium state. So if Q is less than K, it means that the reaction will move from left to right in order to attain the equilibrium. So this was how we can compare what is the direction of equilibrium being achieved on the basis of the reaction question and the equilibrium constant. Now let's discuss certain important terms which will be very much helpful to us when we will deal more about this ionic equilibrium chapter. So the first term is electric conductivity. How are we going to define electric conductivity? We can say that the substances which allow the electric current to pass through them are called electric conductors, and this property by the virtue of which they allow the electricity to pass through them is known as electrical conductivity. So if you have, for example, any substance, if I say you have NaCl and you dissolve NaCl in water to obtain a solution which is known as brine, because aqueous NaCl is known as brine. Now you can see that if I put two electrodes and if I see that a bulb glows or not, we'll say that yes, a bulb glows. That means the substances which are capable of conducting electricity through them, these are known as electric conductors, and this property by the virtue of which they can conduct electricity is known as electrical conductivity. Now, on the basis of this electrical conductivity, the substances can be defined into two basic types. The first are known as non-conductors of electricity and the second are known as conductors of electricity. So what do we mean by non-conductors of electricity? It means that all those substances which do not conduct or which do not allow the electric current to pass through them are known as the non-conductors of electricity. For example, you can take any covalent compound. You take, for example, methane. You take, for example, ethane. So these are the substances which will not allow the current to pass through them. You take any oil, you take another kind of organic substance. So all the substances where you have the covalent linkages among the molecules, you take all the non-metals, then those substances, they cannot allow the electricity to pass through them. Such kind of substances are known as non-conductors of electricity. Whereas the substances which allow the electric current to pass through them, these are known as conductors. And the very common examples of conductors are all the metallic substances which we take. Like we take silver wire, we take gold wire, we take copper wire. So copper wire, silver wire, gold wire, they all have certain amount of electrons. Now if you apply a potential, they have the chances where the electron can move from a region where the potential difference is there. So if you have an electron which is there inside the metallic plate or which is there inside a metal, and if you apply the potential difference, the electron has a tendency to move. And if the electron moves, that means it's nothing but the conduction of electricity. So the examples of conductors are, we have all the metals, we have alloys, we have acidic and basic solutions, we have salt solution, and we have graphite also. Now graphite is also a very good conductor of electricity because graphite has a kind of layered structure. and thus there are certain electrons which can slip between the layers. So these layers can slip over one another and the electrons are free to move. Now since the electrons are free to move, that means they are the good conductors of electricity. Now on the basis of the conducting units, the conductors can be further defined into two types. So first of all, we discussed that for any substance, whether it will be able to conduct electricity or it won't be able to conduct electricity. Now the substances which were able to conduct electricity were defined as conductors, and now we can further define the conductors according to the basis of the conducting units, like the substance which is actually responsible for the conduction of current. Now those substances where the conduction of current is because of some metallic character, so such substances are known as metallic or electric conductors. Now whenever there is conduction of electricity, due to the presence of free and mobile electrons which act as electricity conducting units, for example the metals, alloys, graphite, gas, carbon, etc., these are known as metallic conductors and these are also known as electric conductors. And this we have just explained 2 minutes ago. Like for example, if you have a silver wire. So if I am having a silver wire, that means I have certain free electrons in the wire. These electrons are either known as free electrons or these are also known as mobile electrons. So now if we apply the potential difference across the silver wire, these electrons will start moving, and if they start moving, that means the electricity is being conducted due to the presence of these free electrons or mobile electrons, and such type of conductors are known as metallic conductors or electric conductors. Now the conductors can be also of a second type, and the second type of conductors are known as ionic conductors or electrolytes. Now what do we mean by ionic conductors? As I have already told you, for example, if you are dissolving NaCl in water. So if you dissolve NaCl in water, you will be getting Na positive, Cl minus, you also have H positive and OH minus. And if I compare what is taking place when NaCl is dissolved in water, I will see that there are certain ions. These are cations and these are anions. So there are certain ions which will be created in the solution, and since these are charged particles, if you apply a potential difference, these charged particles start moving. And once there is a movement of charged particle, that means there is a conduction of current. So all the conductors in which the current is passed through due to the presence of free ions are known as ionic conductors, and these are also known as electrolytes or electrolytic conductors. Students, this was all about the introduction of the chapter, where we had discussed some of the basic concepts which were very important for us to discuss about the further chapter. Now since we have done about the important terms which are to be used in the chapter, we'll now move over to the next topic, where Arrhenius theory of electrolytic dissociation will be considered in the next part. So I hope to see you soon in the next part. By the time, take care and do well in your life.